Because I believe in being kind and welcoming to guests, we're going to let our guests go first today, and we'll start with Senator Sanders.
Senator Paul, thank you very much for holding this hearing, and let me thank our panelists for, without exception, their very cogent testimony. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution states very clearly, and I quote, "Congress shall have the power to declare war," end quote. Founding fathers gave the power to authorize military conflicts to Congress for one very simple reason. Congress is the branch of the government that is most accountable to the people. There is no question but that over the years, Congress has allowed its authority over this very important issue of war-making to ebb. It is time for us to reassert that authority and to start asking some very tough questions about the wars, and I use the word wars, W-A-R-S, that we are currently in. Now, some people may think that this is an interesting, abstract discussion. We have brilliant constitutional scholars, wonderful intellectual debate, but let me assure every person here that the abdication of Congress to its responsibilities over war has had incredibly dire and horrific consequences for the people of our country and, in fact, the world. So I want to bring this down to earth and away from an abstract, although enormously important constitutional discussion. I want to give you 3 examples in recent American history where Congress did not ask the right questions, abdicated its responsibility, and the consequences were enormous. Very few Americans know that when we deal with Iran, very much in the news right now, how many people know that in 1953, the United States, along with the British, overthrew the democratically elected government of Mohammad Mossadegh, reinstalling authoritarian rule under the Shah. In 1979, the Shah was overthrown in the Iranian Revolution, bringing to power an extremist anti-American government. In 1953, the United States government, without congressional approval, thought that it could simply remove the government of Iran in order to protect wealthy oil interests. And what has been the consequences of that over the years? Congress abdicated its responsibility. And the second one, more relevant to my generation, was the war in Vietnam. In 1964, now Iran took place under Eisenhower, Republican. In 1964, Lyndon Johnson, Democrat, otherwise, in my view, a very great president. But in this instance, cited an attack on a U.S. ship in the Gulf of Tonkin as a pretext for escalating the U.S. intervention in Vietnam. But we now know from his own recordings that Johnson himself doubted that story about that attack. Johnson's administration misled both Congress and the American people into a war that resulted in the loss of over 50,000 American soldiers and over 1 million Vietnamese. Congress was lied to. There was no serious debate about American intervention in that war. Third example, more recently, that we all remember was Iraq. Today, it is now broadly acknowledged that the Iraq War was a foreign policy blunder of enormous magnitude. In this case, the Bush administration lied to the American people, claiming that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. The result of that war, the loss of thousands of brave American soldiers, the displacement of millions of people in the Middle East, and bringing us to where we are right now. In other words, what we have seen is time and time again, disasters occur when administrations, Democrat and Republican, mislead Congress and the American people, and when Congress fails to do its constitutional job in terms of asking the hard questions of whether or not we should be in a war. And I think we need to ask that very hard question today. And here is the point that I hope the American people are asking themselves. Is the war on terror a perpetual, never-ending war necessary to keep us safe? I personally believe that we have become far too comfortable with the United States engaging in military interventions all over the world. After 9/11, Congress passed an authorization for the use of military force, quote, against those responsible for the recent attacks launched against the United States, end quote. The following year, Congress passed the 2002 AUMF against Iraq. We have now been in Afghanistan for 17 years. We have been in Iraq for 15 years. We are occupying a portion of Syria, and this administration has indicated that it may broaden that mission even more. We are waging a secretive drone war in at least 5 countries. Our forces right now, as we speak, are supporting a Saudi-led war in Yemen, which has killed thousands of civilians and has created the worst humanitarian crisis on the planet today. Clearly, these outdated and expansive AUMFs have been used by 3 different administrations, Republican and Democrat, as a blank check for the president to wage war without congressional consent or oversight. Meanwhile, we are currently, quote unquote, fighting terrorism in some 76 countries with an estimated cost of $5.6 trillion and untold lives lost since 2001. I think it is very clear, and our panelists, I think, made the point extraordinarily well, without exception, that the time is long overdue, Mr. Chairman, for the United States Congress to respect the Constitution of this country and to stand up for that Constitution and to demand that it is the Congress of the United States, not a president, who determines whether our young men and women are put in harm's way. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll next turn to Senator